Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France, and of course you good old boys from Africa. You know we love the Big C drop. We love them in Canada. But Big C, there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful July 25th, 2018. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, it's a beautiful day. I was going to go heading out hunting this morning, and as I was driving down the road, I saw this fruit stand. And they had these gorgeous, luscious, fresh strawberries. And I'm like, oh, my goodness.
Yep.
So I pulled over, and I didn't have to hunt too far. Just, first couple of rows right there, I just pulled them up and put them in the trunk of the Escalade.
Yep.
Headed on back to the house.
Yeah.
Made myself a little fresh pound cake, Charlton. I made up some creme fraiche. I know you people out there on the West Coast are all fluffy and everything, and use that canned whipped cream.
Yep.
But I made some creme fraiche up. And when I'm done with the show, I'm going to take that pound cake and soak it with a little Grand Marnier.
Yeah.
This so it'll learn how to act right.
Man, that sounds good
and
to
then
me.
I'm going to stack them strawberries and that creme fraiche on that, Charlton.
Yes.
And if I put on 2 pounds, don't worry about it.
We won't worry about it. I'm sure you'll sweat it off with all that heat we have running around the country, Big C. I think you made me hungry. It's always good when you got something good to eat. I hope your neighbors don't mind that you took some of their fruit off of their stand. But in the meantime, you do what you got to do in laws, fair, and love and war. I do want to say today's segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. Man, it's hot. It's so hot in California, 106 degrees up here in Northern California, and people are saying, yeah, but it's a dry heat. I wonder if that's how the turkey feels when it's in the oven, that it's hot. They say, yeah, but it's a dry heat, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's a dry heat, but you got to moisturize that bird also, Charlton.
Yeah.
But when you talk about a dry heat, you think about one of the most beautiful, picturesque places in the world, Yosemite. I saw on the news where there were fires on the outskirts of Yosemite National Park, and they had to evacuate the place, Charlton. I've had the pleasure of going out there and seeing Half Dome and the falls at Yosemite. Camped out there one time. Just a beautiful, picturesque setting. One of the true wonders of the United States, and happens to be threatening by fires. I know everybody out there on the West Coast has to be a little worried about that fire, plus many others, Charlton.
Yeah, that's the one sad thing about it, is when you have a beautiful place like Yosemite National Park, you have people that can go up there and camp. And not all the time is a fire started by lightning, Big C. Sometimes a fire is just started by people not knowing how to camp and not following the park ranger rules. So we do hope that everybody, as much as possible, be safe, put out your fires. One thing that I noticed about Yosemite, I actually climbed Half Dome about 10 years ago, and it's a beautiful sight. It's a beautiful climb. It's a tough climb, but it's a good climb. But going into Yosemite National Park, there's actually a bear. We talk about Animal Crossings, Big C. This was just a sign, like Smokey and the Bear, telling people to put out their fires. But would you believe a lot of people just don't? You still see people that are driving in the car, and some people still smoke, and they'll toss that cigarette butt out the window. What a foolish thing. But I wonder, what will it take to have people stop doing that? All it takes is one stupid person, and you have a huge fire like that. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, just carelessness of people, not thinking about others and not thinking about nature. As you say, when you have a lot of dried tinder like you have with all those heat waves you're having on the West Coast, Charlton, it doesn't take but a spark from a cigarette. And they smolter. They don't go out just because you toss it out of the window. They'll sit there and smolter in that dry grass, Charlton, and all of a sudden a little gust of wind, poof, and now you got a rolling fire that has occurred, Charlton. And when these things occur and you don't have a fire station right away, I think most people, take for granted there's a fire station within, a mile or so, a couple of miles of their home.
Yeah.
And they live in residential areas, and so they can always get relief and aid, in an expeditious fashion.
Yep.
But when you're in a wilderness area like that, Charlton, they don't have fire stations everywhere. I've watched on the news where they're using the helicopter drops, the water and the fire retardant, trying to, resist, get the fire back. But, as a human being, and not thinking about what potentially can happen just because of your carelessness, Charlton.
Yeah.
How many lives can be lost? How much Mother Nature has been destroyed? Not just the trees and the brush, Charlton, but the wildlife that live in those areas, Charlton. You've destroyed their habitat. Many of them can't escape the fire. Because I know when we were there, we saw deers and we saw raccoons and marmots and squirrels and things like that, Charlton. I mean, if that was back home, they'd be cooking, on the stove. But, for them to be out there in their own natural habitat and have something like this devastation going through their habitat is just sad.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned, Big C, that you let the wildlife. They say don't feed the wildlife. When people from the South come out, they have to say, don't eat the wildlife, Big C. So I'm glad you guys are good at reading the signs. I do hope that everybody's safe as possible up there in Central California. Beautiful area, Yosemite. I remember President Obama came out. He and Michelle Obama came out to Yosemite about 2 years ago, and they came out on Air Force One. They actually landed at Castle Air Force Base near Atwater, which is actually an Air Force museum now. And they had, back in the day, those B-52s, we talk about honoring the military, those B-52s are out there right now at Castle Air Force Base, which is really the backdrop to Yosemite when you go through Atwater and Merced. What beautiful planes. But even when President Obama came out and they landed at Castle Air Force Base in Atwater, they took a helicopter into Yosemite National Forest. And he opined that it was one of the most beautiful places that he had seen. But just our hats go off to the park rangers there that do a good job keeping everything clean. But I do want to say that we hope that everybody's safe in the world of sports, Big C, in the NHL. Speaking of Flames, we have the Calgary Flames today. They announced that they had someone retire. Jerome Ncaa retired. He announced his retirement from the Calgary Flames. 525 points scored in 1,219 games played. I know that everybody loves hockey in Canada, but it's really a sport that's grabbed the attention of a lot of American fans, and the expansion of the NHL is not in Canada, it's actually expanding in the United States. Talk about the great Jerome and the Calgary Flames, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, Jerome McGlynn, Charlton, retired from the Calgary Flames, and when you think about him, he's a part of history in the NHL. He's not one of the greater known names in the league, Charlton, but he is the first African-American to play 20 years in the NHL. Well,
wow.
When you think about that, 20 years in a professional sport, and Jerome spent 16 of those years with the Calgary Flames. You got to also think about it, Charlton. The Calgary Flames did not start in Canada. They started in Atlanta. They were originally the Atlanta Flames, and they moved to Calgary in 1979.
That's good enough.
So when you think about Jerome and being the longest tenured African-American to ever play in the NHL, now this is a league, Charlton, that's been around close to 100 years.
Yeah.
And Jerome has spent 20 years, 16 of them with one franchise, Charlton, winning a Stanley Cup in Calgary, and now being able to retire as a Calgary Flame.
Yeah.
But, these are the things that people don't talk about as far as minority participation in many sports, Charlton, the length of careers that some of these minority players have. And Jerome, he's originally from Alaska, Charlton.
Yeah.
He's a Native American. When you think about it, he's, multiracial.
Yeah.
But, being 20 years in one sport, and it doesn't make any difference what it is, that is a tremendous feat to have. But Jerome, all congrats to him on a great career, Charlton, being able to retire from a sport that he loved and he brought so much compassion to, being a member of the Flames, and also representing the minority race, Charlton, and people not really paying much attention to it. There was one other great minority athlete, Charlton, that played in that, as they call it in Canada, province. We call them states here.
Yes.
When you think about Grant Freer, everybody talks about Wayne Gretzky and the Edmonton Eskimos. But Grant Freer was a minority goaltender And you think about it. He holds the record for consecutive Stanley Cups won, Charles. Grant Fuhr was a minority African-American goaltender with the Edmonton Eskimos and 5 consecutive Stanley Cups.
Yep, I tell you what, everybody knows that hockey's a great game, and having the appreciation by seeing it more here in the United States. But why? You talked about Calgary starting in Atlanta, and then finding a way going across going to another country, playing up in Canada. Why do we find that more teams are opening in the United States when it didn't start? I mean, that's not the United States' main game. It's mostly, you think of baseball and football and basketball. But why have fewer teams decided to expand in Canada? That's where they've gotten so much support, even from the college of a big city. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you look at it, you don't have the major cities in Canada that you have here in the U.S. You have a team in Vancouver, you have a team in Edmonton and Calgary, you have a team in Winnipeg, you have a team in Toronto, and you have a team in Montreal, Charlton. Those are the major cities in Canada. The Quebec Nordiques left, and they became the Charlotte Hurricane. Mm-hmm. They won a Stanley Cup, since being there. Actually, the Winnipeg team now was the second team to leave Atlanta. They were the Atlanta Thrashers.
Oh, really?
And they went back and became the Winnipeg Jets, which they had left Winnipeg and became the Nordiques, I believe it was. The Dallas Stars.
Okay.
And so when you think about that, those teams have left Canada, but they've gone back also. But when you look at major marketing and television revenue, that drives all professional sports.
Yeah.
So when you look at some of these outlets in the United States, especially like down in Tampa Bay, there's a large Canadian contingency of retirees down in South Florida.
Yep.
So they thought it would be natural to take hockey and put it in South Florida, because you not only would get those retirees who grew up with hockey, but also family members who came to visit them, Charlton, would be a natural draw to those arenas. And they have some huge and spacious arenas, down in Florida. But, just from an expansion perspective,
yeah,
you have to go where you can get the dollars and the seats, Charlton.
Yeah.
When you look at some of the smaller cities in Canada, they can't support a 20,000-seat arena, night in and night out. So
yeah,
that's the reason why you've had the expansion here in the U.S. and not in Canada.
Yeah. Obviously, it's about marketing. It's about the size of the marketplace. But it's still a great game, and more people are starting to grab onto it here in the great United States of America. I want to touch on something with a little bit of a legal nature. And we know everything's out there in the news about what's going on, what happened with Ohio State recently. We all know about the Penn State scandal, and then Nassar with Michigan State. But he feels, what else can he say when you get the sentencing that he received? He still says that he feels that he was unjustly convicted and sentenced in his case of molestation, and is seeking a new judge to get a reduced sentence. Now, if you feel you were unjustly convicted, why are you asking for a reduced sentence as opposed to a mistrial? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's the iconic part about that, Charlton. Larry Nassar was given a 175-year sentence, which is a death sentence in prison. Even if he has his sentence reduced in half, Charlton, let me see what the math is. 175 divided by 2.
Yeah.
He'll come out with still, 85
yeah.
years. Okay,
yeah.
85, 90 years, Charlton.
Yeah.
87 years he's going to get. Now, he's in his 50s. So he gets a reduced sentence in half, Charlton. He gets down to 87 years.
Yeah.
That's going to place him up, around 130 years of age?
Yeah.
135? So if he can survive that, I think he should be released. If he can survive past age 135 in prison, I think he should be up for parole and release. I think he would be, rehabilitated.
Well, think about it.
For him to come out and say that he felt that he was unjustly sentenced for over 250 young ladies, Charlton, that he molested and sexually assaulted.
Yep.
This lets you know the mindset of this individual. How sick and warped that he is to feel that what he did not warrant the punishment that he received.
Yeah.
The heinous acts that he committed on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, Charlton, he felt that they were not criminal.
Yeah.
The problem that I have with it, not just with Nassar, is that all of his enablers, Charlton, is that Nassar is the fall guy for all of his enablers. And if Nasser is the only one to go to prison behind this, Charlton, that shows how flawed our system is. That's as much as the NFL players are talking about, social injustice.
Yeah.
This is social injustice for these young ladies, Charlton.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, women have been wrapped in the same justice situation that men have, Charlton, over the years.
Yep.
And so for Nasser to sit there and cry, woe me, how much did he cry when he was molesting these young girls, Charlton?
That's a good point, and a lot of people have had to deal with that. And even when you think about it, I want to, not that it's as heinous, but when you look at Urban Meyer for Ohio State, there's one of his coaches, Zach Smith, had a history of domestic abuse allegations. Okay, allegations, Big C. So he let him go, and that's been, it's kind of been a hush hush, but it's been kind of seeping out there. But I just want to know, everybody knows in their organization who's doing what. They just know, because people tend to have people who look out for guys that are on their team, especially their coaching staff. Where there's the Rick Pitino situation, people know what's going on. Now, Urban Meyer's been pretty squeaky clean. He's not like some of the coaches that were there with Maurice Clarett. And I just want to get your thoughts on, are coaches cutting bait too soon when allegations can get you fired? When they say stand behind your coach when he's under the fire, stand behind your teammates. Well, with Zach Smith and his history of domestic abuse, when you say history, that means people knew about it. Now, I just want to get your thoughts. That's going back in 2009 and 15, but the stuff that Nasser was doing and Michigan State was hiding, it didn't just happen one day and they brought it to the public attention. These things go on. It's still going on in different universities. So what takes a coach so long to throw someone under the bus for an allegation, even when they're not convicted? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Justin, it's more in depth than just the allegation. You got to understand the repercussions that have come to Ohio State in the past month, the insight that have come from the sexual misconduct towards male athletes that have been going on for a few decades at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at Smith's case, Smith had a restraining order put on him from his wife 2 years ago, Charlton, for domestic violence. Okay, so he has an ongoing history of this. Urban Meyer may have taken too long to even fire the guy, Charlton.
Yeah.
Because this is the third incident with him. When you have a player on a university team, Charlton, he gets hit with domestic violence and a restraining order, he's dismissed from the university.
Yeah.
He loses his scholarship. You talk about standing by a coach, Charlton. When you have a restraining order because of police interaction, and a judge felt that it was right to issue a restraining order against you, Charlton, that meant that they had culpable evidence of incidents that you had been involved in. Urban Meyer covers this up like many other coaches. He didn't make it public knowledge that his coach had a restraining order for spousal abuse.
No.
He didn't do that. So he's culpable just like the coach is, Charlton. His assistant coach. And so this is the thing, this is what Joe Paterno did. He hid what Jerry Sandusky did. This is what we've had at Michigan State when you got Izzo and you got the basketball coach sitting there hiding incidents with their players and saying that it's internal investigations on campus police that will cover that. They don't bring in outside police. So, this is a problem that we see with the Big Ten right now. We've had Penn State, we had Ohio State in the past, we have Ohio State again, we got Michigan State. This is a culture in that conference, Charlton, that is coming to the forefront of sexual misconduct. And how much of it do you want to cover up, or do you want to make it public on a daily basis?
Remember down at Baylor University, the Big 12 conference, when Briles had his situation, and the thing about some of these coaches, they're all making seven figures. Nothing wrong with that. If that's what the market pays, is what it pays. They can't be responsible for the behavior of other people. However, they also can't participate in covering up the behavior of other people. So when I look at Briles, there was even some situations that went on up at Washington State. A lot of the stuff gets pushed under the carpet, especially when you have a good football team. But people know. But I want to contrast that, because when I look at what happened with University of Southern California, and Sarkisian had that, he tried to file a suit saying that he was wrongfully terminated by USC because he had a substance abuse problem, or they would say he had a liability, or because alcoholism, for whatever they want to say it was, you can't fire someone for being an alcoholic, supposedly, allegedly, but you can. But he wanted to sue even though they threw out his suit. So USC, if they were in the right or wrong for that, we're not trying to encourage someone for being, having an alcoholic problem, especially if it's a student. Like you say, if they're out drinking and driving, they lose their scholarship. But Sarkisian, they knew he had that problem when he was at Washington. He gets hired at Southern California anyway. And they let him go for whatever reason, and he tried to sue them for that reason because they knew he had that problem coming in. Is that different than guys like Urban Meyer and even some of the guys like Paterno back in the day? I know it's different situations, but is that different if you're, in your thoughts, Big C?
Well, Charlton, he had the DUI situation at the University of Washington.
Yeah.
He came to USC back where he had coached under Pete Carroll. They put him through a background check, Charlton, and
he passed
put him in some counseling.
Yeah.
The problem with Sarkisian wasn't just the alcohol, Charlton. It was excessive prescription drugs.
Yeah.
That he was getting prescription drugs illegally. He was getting them from players as well as other staff members, Charlton. That one was found out about Sarkisian.
But
you can't condone that, Charlton. Yeah. I mean, to say that you knew the guy had an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
Most Americans drink casually, Charlton.
Yeah.
But when you get in public settings and you become just a total drunk, Charlton,
yeah,
that's a problem. That now you're representing, and you got to understand, in his contract, he had a conduct clause.
Yeah.
Just like you see with NFL players. When you have conduct detrimental to the university, Charlton,
yeah,
then that's what he did. And not only that, he was committing a criminal act by obtaining illegal prescription drugs, Charlton, painkillers.
Yeah.
So you're mixing these painkillers with the alcohol, Charlton. You're creating a very toxic environment. Now, what if he gets behind the wheel of a car and on game day, driving to the stadium?
Like the gentleman in Arizona.
Driving from the stadium from a post-ceremonial celebration, Charlton.
Yeah.
He's an employee of the university. Who becomes liable? The university, Charlton.
Yeah, didn't that just happen?
But Sarkisian is supposed to be a responsible adult.
Yeah.
Here it is. You're going to reprimand the young men that are under scholarship on your university. You catch one of them with a DUI, you're going to take a scholarship?
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to say that Sarkisian should not be sacrificed?
That's a good point. But did he not have that behavior when they hired him coming in from what? There's a reason Washington let him go. And there's a reason that USC let him go. But then he gets hired on by Alabama. Now, did his behavior stop all of a sudden? Or is that something that Nick Saban, think about it, Big C. These things go on before they get thrown out in the public. But here's a guy with a track record that kind of walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. And you say, well, maybe it's a duck. How much concern should Nick Saban have when we see these guys are getting in trouble for what they did in the past, not for what they did today, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, he's no longer at Alabama. Last year he went to the Atlanta Falcons after they lost in the national championship game, 2 years ago. He last season was the offensive coordinator with the Atlanta Falcons. Now he has a different horse to ride, Charlton, in looking at the conduct situation of the NFL. The NFL can come in at any time and test you. It's a different scenario than what it is in college football, Charlton, because there's governing scenarios there.
Yeah.
And so he has to walk a finer line in the NFL. And I think one of the things that he may have learned, Charlton, is just don't drive.
Yeah.
The NFL will not dock you for alcoholism, Charlton.
No.
But they will dock you if you're driving with your alcoholism. And I think that Sarkisian, in his time and part of his contract with the Falcons now, Charlton, is that he must have a driver.
Yeah.
To take him to and from. And he most likely he lives in a close proximity to their practice facility.
Yeah.
So that he doesn't have to be out, too far away if he is driving.
Yeah.
But, the owners need to treat the coaches like they do the players as well as the leagues, Charlton.
Yeah.
If the league gives the players conduct detrimental clauses in their contract, coaches need to have that, Charlton. When we look at all the coaches over the years, whether it's spousal abuse, whether it's alcoholism, these things have occurred. And these coaches skate because they cover up for each other, as you said.
Oh, yeah.
But you cannot just make players an scapegoat when coaches are doing just as much as the players are.
Well,
if not more.
I agree with that. And I just wonder if there's something that's, because they're looking at the background of all these coaches now, and they're bringing up things that happened 2 and 3 years ago. I wonder if something will come up with Alabama. Why does someone skip town when they lose a championship game? You had to get there in the first place, so it couldn't have been a bad coach. There might be something else coming that we don't know about. I do want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. And for every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports. Whether you're a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school team, or your mom and pop soccer leagues, when you reach out to them, let them know Big C sent you. I bring that stuff up because, again, if you take it from college football, and Sarkisian now with the NFL, Jerry Jones, not that it ever will go away, because I don't think they ever addressed it the right way, but Jerry Jones comes out again with another statement that the Cowboys will stand and that they're going to respect the anthem, etc. But he even blasted Donald Trump by saying, stay out of it and that we'll deal with it ourselves. But the Dallas Cowboys, they've had so many players that were in trouble for domestic violence and even substance abuse. But they take a stronger stand on standing for the national anthem, but they've hired players who've knowingly abused women. Why such grandstanding on this flag issue, but not such grandstanding and such vehemently denouncing giving jobs to violent players? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the reason why Jones is making this stance, Charlton, is because the league has pushed back on its stance as far as fining or suspending players. That has been put on hold. That will no longer happen.
Yeah.
So it was very easy for Jerry Jones to speak out on that. But to look at the players' social stance, Charlton, for social injustice and how it has played out with the National Football League, saying that it's driven down the ratings. The ratings are just as high as they've ever been, Charlton, and even more viewers than they've ever been because you have these devices that you could look at. You don't have to sit at home on the television. Not only that, Charlton, we talked about the drinking. Look at the bars that cover the game now, Charlton. All these outlets where you have tons of people sitting inside that don't have a Nielsen box.
Yeah.
You got a bar and you got a couple hundred people. There's no Nielsen boxes saying there's a couple hundred people in there.
No.
You tell me what sports casino in Vegas or any other state that covers the game, all of them have a sports lounge, Charlton, in all these huge casinos across the country.
Yeah.
Where people are watching the game. So there's thousands of people that are not being accounted for that are watching games, probably even millions.
Yeah.
So, but when I look at the NFL on what you just said about hiring violent people versus the social stance that minority athletes have taken against social injustice, Charlton.
Yeah.
You think about the NFL. It has a week where they talk about no domestic violence, even though the Dallas Cowboys, they protest that week.
Yeah.
Because they hire people.
That do that.
Big on domestic violence.
That's true.
Them and the New York Giants, they stay out of that week.
Yep.
The NFL also celebrates Cancer Awareness Month for an entire month, Charlton, where players are allowed to wear anything pink that they want attached to their uniform.
Yep.
But when it comes to talking about black issues, the NFL doesn't want to speak about that, Charlton.
Yeah.
Social injustice. They say, wait, no. We don't condone domestic violence. We're going to let it be known for an entire week in the NFL.
Yep.
We advocate against breast cancer, which all Americans do, Charlton. Everyone around the world is an opponent of breast cancer, and we hope that they find a cure to ease the pain and suffering of so many great women and men in this world that have also suffered with breast cancer.
Yeah.
But when we talk about black social issues and the atrocity that has occurred in this country, and Colin Kaepernick was the first to really make a huge statement on it, and then the rest of the black NFL players followed suit, Charlton. And you want to say that, no, we can't talk about that because it concerns blacks.
Yeah.
Just like society in America, Charlton, when there's a black issue, it's not time to talk about it. We can talk about anything else in America, Charlton.
Yes.
But if it's an issue affecting and potentially enhancing the life of black people, Charlton, it's not time for conversation. And the NFL has taken that stance, Charlton, but they haven't taken that stance against hiring criminals.
Yeah, that's true. I like when you bring up that point because at some point in time, if we could all say, hey, you know what, I was wrong, I made a mistake, I apologize for standing on the side of this media slant that came from someplace that said these black players are anti-America, and they've never been anti-America, fought in every war America's had. And I wish they could just go back and say, you know what, we got it wrong, and we didn't. We spoke before we researched, and we spoke before we listened, and we apologize that we, as the owners of NFL teams, that we actually stood against our players and saying what it takes to keep their kids safe. I think that's so important, but if you never go back and admit you're wrong, it's easy to keep saying that, you know what, we also want to stand against these players bringing too much attention against anti the flag. It's never been anti the flag. But I do appreciate Jerry Jones for one thing. Whether you like him or not, the man knows how to make money. I hear some people saying in media, well, they got to get the players to just stand there and stop talking about this stuff because it's cutting into the bottom line. And here Jerry Jones at the Forbes top of the list when it comes to the top most successful sports franchises. Jerry Jones, $4.8 billion. So those people have to know that they were wrong also. And I just wonder if they will ever come back and say, you know what, Big C, we looked at what our players were doing, just like having this pause, like you say, pause your brakes or pump your brakes. They've all pumped their brakes on this national anthem things, but Jerry Jones comes out. Will they ever pump their brakes and say, you know what, we were wrong, we should have always sided with our players, Big C? We want to try to find a solution, not tell them to shut up, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Carlton, when you think about it, and I know you're a very strong proponent of it, players being social activists, taking the cause to the streets. If our politicians took the actions of our minority football players in this country, Charlton, talking about taking the lead for social reform, instead of sitting there playing hobnob politics like you're for the American people.
Yeah.
You're not. You think about these black athletes, they're for American people, Charlton.
Yeah.
They're not sitting there trying to decide which country you're going to go to war with.
Nope.
You know, which budget you're going to cut, Charlton, which program you're going to take away. And those programs are generally taken away from minority Americans, Charlton.
Yes.
When you think about what these politicians do, Charlton.
Yeah.
But these athletes, when you look at some of the programs, you know, as far as social involvement of minority athletes in America, basketball, football, baseball, hockey, Charlton, the inner city programs that they set up to help youth,
yeah.
You know, the free camps that they give away, the endowments that they've set up, Charlton, the nonprofits that they've set up. This is what our leaders in politics need to look at, is what athletes strive for. And even Colin Kaepernick, even though he's been blackballed from the NFL, Charlton,
yes.
The amount of money that he donated for social causes. You don't have your local politicians doing that, Charlton.
No.
They don't get out in the grassroots programs in the community and be seen in public. They don't do that. The public is beneath them.
Yeah.
But the athletes are embracing the public, Charlton. They're going out to do whatever they can to help youth achieve in this country. Not just youth, but adults also, Charlton. They have set up programs for housing, education, you know, health. This is what our politicians should do, but our athletes have taken it out of their pockets, Charlton.
Yeah.
Not just minority athletes, Charlton. All athletes have done this, of all cultures.
Yes.
But this is what our politicians can learn from, the strength of our athletes and the unity that they possess. I
agree with that very much. So we always find that talking helps everything get better, and I hope that more people will continue talking about things that affect everybody. And I just hope that someday, and maybe I'm naive, I know I'm naive about a lot of things, but I would hope that the league could come out and say, how do we side with our players, as opposed to trying to tell our players they got to shut up. I think that would make a real big difference. Whether it's Bidwell or Jerry Jones, they still have a chance before the season kicks off to say, you know what, we do stand with our players, and we apologize for some of the things that we accuse them of, because mainstream media did it as well. I want to bring up something that I thought was kind of enjoyable when we talk about baseball. Standing by your team. I watched the Dodgers and the Philadelphia Phillies. The series they had, I think 16 innings, that's baseball. Now, the bad thing about that is you have fans leaving. It looks like no one was there. It really was one of the best series that we've had in a while with teams from the East Coast and West Coast. They went 16 innings last night. The Phillies came out on top. The Dodgers run out of pitchers, Big C. How do you run out of pitchers in Major League Baseball and have to use a third baseman who gave up the winning home run, Big C, in the game? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, what you do is you have a starter that you plan on using the next day that you didn't want to bring into the lineup.
Yeah.
But you went through your entire bullpen, Charlton. You went through the rest of your rotation. And so when you have a game that lasts 5.5 hours, that's the problem when you're looking at your pitching staff, Charlton. You know, there's only so many pitches in an arm and so many hours you want a pitcher to throw.
Yes.
And so when you're going through those relievers and then you got to use some starters, Charlton, in the middle part of the game, you know, this is what happens. I mean, you talk about baseball, but 5.5 hours.
Too much.
When you look at a sporting event, you know, when they talk about football exceeding 3 hours, how long that is, you know, that the game is being drawn out. And at least in football, there's excitement every play. There's something big that can happen.
Yeah.
When you look at baseball and the time consumption of that game, Charlton, over 5.5 hours, and as you said, they had a third baseman who gave up the winning home run in the 16th inning to the Phillies.
Yeah.
That's a long time. I mean, you got kids that are there in the stadium. You think about parents that have taken the kids to the game.
Yeah.
And that game ends at 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
1:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So
yeah.
That's a long, long day. That game starts out, you know, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You know, so, you know, it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, and to stay drawn to the tube or even in the stadium.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of coffee that's going to have to be drank.
That's a lot of coffee, or a lot of what they call the sugar candies you got to eat too. And speaking of coffee and sugar candies, I mean, what a great game. Really love that Dodgers and Phillies series. But I was watching, you know, I got this habit of, I learned how to Google games on my phone, on my tablet. I was watching a college football game because I really can't wait for the kickoff of college football. Last night I was watching the game, and it was the 1986 Orange Bowl down in Miami, Florida. That beautiful stadium that they tore down for some reason, and it was the Oklahoma Sooners, and it was the Penn State Nittany Lions. Barry Switzer, Joe Paterno. There was a quarterback by the name of Jamil Holloway who played quarterback for Oklahoma. Keith Jackson was a tight end that played tight end for the Oklahoma Sooners. It was a game that went back and forth in the early going, and the Bosworth was on that team also for the Oklahoma Sooners, and they beat Penn State 25-10. But that game in the Orange Bowl, it was one of the more exciting games that I had seen. Jamil Holloway came out of Los Angeles, Southern California, and actually took over when Troy Aikman, who came out of Henrietta, Oklahoma, got injured. And so he was at the helm of Oklahoma, and it didn't drop off. They actually played for national championships. But a game back then had so much intrigue just because some of those players went on to play pro and had a great career. Keith Jackson, Bosworth had a decent career. But just the history of that game, Big C, that's 1986, and it felt like they played it last night. It was so good. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charleston, you know, college football was at its height in the 80s when you look at all the fanfare as that game started to grow and more broadcast outlets started showing games, Charleston.
Yeah.
It became a national affair, and when you speak about some of the great players that played in that game, Charleston, I mean, many of them went on to have, you know, good pro careers.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of those things. Tony Casillas, a great defensive tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. You know, played in Super Bowls with them.
Yep.
You know, unfortunately, Brian Bosworth lost his life a little over a month ago, and he passed away. You know, and he was an iconic, historic figure in college football.
Yeah.
You know, he was one of those guys that Sports Illustrated made a cover boy, and he was the #1 draft pick of the Seattle Seahawks, Charlton, in the NFL. Unfortunately, due to injuries, his career just did not take off the way many people had hoped that it would.
Yeah.
And that has happened with many players, Charlton. You don't have to always be a first-round draft pick to not get that notoriety or even to get the injuries, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you think about those two great coaches, Barry Switzer, who went on to coach with the Dallas Cowboys and win a Super Bowl with them, although Joe Paterno's career did not end up the way that many had hoped to, and he had to leave Penn State in shame and scandal.
Yeah.
But the history of those universities, Charlton, and when you can bring a game on from 1986, was that 34 years ago, 36 years ago, that still has interest because so many people, and you think about the alumni and the boosters from those universities, how much those games meant to them, and that game was a national scale game also, Charlton.
Yeah, and those teams, Big C, are still on top, and that brings me to a little bit, just some of the flavor of the college football season. I think about, will these games coming up, even though that was a bowl game, and they were playing for a chance to be crowned national champion when they actually voted you in, as opposed to having you play in. And back in the day, Penn State was an independent, and then Oklahoma played, I think it was called the Big 8, which is now the Big 12 conference. And we know how that's changed, where some of those schools have gone to the Big 10 and also to the Pac-12 when you think of Nebraska and Colorado. But a game that could have that same type of feel this year, I look at Clemson. Clemson's been at the top of the heap the last couple of years. I mean, Dabo has had a good job recruiting. Now he's recruiting like Paterno did and Switzer did back in the day. He's taking Clemson on the road down to College Station, Texas, where they'll take on Texas A&M. Now, both programs get the best athletes in the country, but Clemson's had a little bit more success, which is ironic since Texas is known as a bigger football state. But here's a chance for A&M to get on the map if they can somehow knock off Clemson and that dominant defensive line that Clemson has, and they've been in the national championship chase the last 3 seasons, Big C. That would be huge for the state of Texas. But could that game in 32 years down the road have the feel of that Oklahoma and Penn State game that we talked about from the Orange Bowl in '86? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, you're paying Dabo Swinney, Jimbo Fisher, what, $75 million?
Yeah.
So, you know, he had to have a whole lot of fields for a whole lot of years, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the games nowadays, Charlton, you can take any week of college football and make it one of those historical games.
Yes.
Because there's so many tremendous athletes out there today, Charlton, and when you look at these programs and the parity that's out there, is that every week you have a game of the ages.
Yes.
When you sit back and look and say, wow, this game reminds me of a game a decade ago, 2 decades ago, a year ago.
Yeah.
That, you know, we see the athlete of today because we have so many camera angles to make the games exciting.
Yeah.
You know, you think about that game you saw in '86 at the Orange Bowl, Charlton, they may have had 12 cameras there.
Yeah.
At best, and that's a national championship game.
Yeah.
Now you look at a big-time game, Charlton, there'll be 20 cameras in the stadium. So you get to see so many different angles and explanations of a game. But, you know, to think about a game opening the season and to have that game, Charlton, go into one of the top games of all time, that would be iconic if it happened. I don't know if it can because Clemson is one of those teams, when you talk about that defensive line, I wouldn't be surprised, Charlton, to see Clemson this year have as many as 5 shutouts on their schedule. That's how dominant their defense is. This defense was young last year, Charlton. They got 1 senior on the defensive line.
Yes.
They got 2 sophomores and a junior. And they got some guys, Charlton, that are just hungry. We think about college athletics now, Charlton. What has happened over the last 50 years in college athletics is that the swing of the southern schools have become dominant.
Oh, yeah.
The reason for that, Charlton, is desegregation. Well, those athletes 50 years ago could mainly go to historically black colleges only, Charlton. Now they've been, you know, incorporated into these mainstream universities.
Yeah.
And these universities have become powerhouses, Charlton. If you go back and think about how strong the historical black colleges were, how dominant the athletes were in those institutions,
yes.
Now they're in the mainstream universities, so those universities have reaped the benefit of desegregation, Charlton.
That's a
by leveraging the historical black colleges and bringing those athletes along.
Yeah.
Only before, 50 years ago, Charlton, only black people saw those athletes.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. When you think about guys like Walter Payton, Jerry Rice, you think about Michael Strahan, just a host of great players that came out of the historically black colleges that you probably never would have heard about had they stayed there. Because there's still players, Air McNair, out of Alcorn State. I think about the plethora of talent that came out of the SWAC in those historically black colleges. That that conference that's called the SWAC and the MEAC, they've sent as many people on to play professional football. You can line them up with the Pac-10. You can line them up even with the SEC for that time that they were out there doing it with Eddie Robinson at the helm. They were neck and neck sending players
Eddie
on to the
Robinson
NFL
alone, Charlton,
by himself.
211 players sent to the NFL. 211 from one university by one coach to the NFL.
You can't find a player or a coach today that can say that. I know Nick Saban's crowned as the best coach right now in the universe. Pete Carroll was back in the day when he was at Southern California.
Look at this with Pete Carroll. What is the complexion of the colors that he's sending to the NFL of his players?
Yeah.
80% of them are black players that Nick Saban is sending to the NFL. Then you got to think about prior to desegregation, Alabama had none. No black players, Charlton.
Wow.
They were always a good program, but they did not dominate sending players to the NFL. Now, you look 50 years later, Charlton, in the comparison of the number of players that Alabama sends to the NFL versus what they did 50 years ago, think about how desegregation benefited that football program, Charlton.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you brought up. When we talked about that game that was played back in the 86 Orange Bowl, Penn State, Oklahoma, I'm watching it on my tablet because there is such intensity, so many great athletes, historical coaches, and I thought the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl, I always wanted to see those two games, granddaddy of them all, and the Rose Bowl. The Orange Bowl, that's a game that usually came on late at night. That was usually the last game to see, but it was always great theater. I want to contrast those two programs as we go back up to the Midwest. When you hear about games like Michigan and Notre Dame, Michigan's going to play at Notre Dame this year. I go back to the days of when you had Eric Parsegian, of course, Lou Holtz, and Bo Schembechler. Now you have Harbaugh there at Michigan, and you have Kelly at Notre Dame. Does that game bring the same type of great feelings of what college football is? Because they have more, they've both started minority quarterbacks, those great universities. Notre Dame's had more minority quarterbacks start at Notre Dame than Southern California has since Lou Holtz had Tony Rice back in the day. And you would not expect that since USC's in the heart of South Central Los Angeles. But does Michigan and Notre Dame still bring chills to you? Are we missing something because we haven't seen them playing for national championships over the past years outside of Notre Dame? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is because of the wealth of talent across the Midwest. But those schools used to always get just all the elite athletes, Charlton. Now they have to go out and compete for those elite athletes. People want to be where they can be seen on television, and it's hard not to see a college kid on television these days with all the local broadcasts that they have up as well as the national broadcast. So that allure is no longer the reason why kids go to certain universities, to be seen on television. I know it was a big draw when I was going to college. Will we be seen on television?
Yeah.
That's what everybody wanted to know. How many games are on television that my family can see me? Now everybody can be seen.
Yep.
But, when you look at those teams, it's about marketing all it is nowadays, Charlton, the hype of a game. Some of the better college football games of the season are never seen. There was a game last year, Charlton, where the University of Memphis played the University of Central Florida, which ended up being the only undefeated team in college football. This game went into double overtime, Charlton. It was a phenomenal game. It was a game that featured some 1,400 yards in total offense. And, it was a game that was a second-tier game on, one of the ESPN outlets.
Yeah.
But there was not a college football game that was better than that all year long, Charlton.
No.
This was a game that they begged for from the major universities. They'd like to see Texas in a game like that, Charlton. They'd like to see Oklahoma in a game like that. USC, Ohio State. They would love to see a team going into double overtime, Charlton, and having 130 points scored in a game.
Yes.
They would love to see that.
Yeah.
But the best college games of the year, Charlton, every year are from the smaller schools.
Yes.
Not the Power 5 conferences, Charlton.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's where you miss the boat. You keep thinking, okay, it has to be a Power 5 conference for it to be a great game, Charlton. And all you have to do is watch college football, because the balance of college football talent-wise, Charlton, is so equal across the slate. And that's why Central Florida was the only undefeated team in the country, Charlton, last year. And they beat a team that was number one in the SEC in a bowl game.
Yeah, isn't that something? I think about the talent that spreads across the country. And again, Nebraska, that used to be a team in Oklahoma that represented the best in college football because they pulled from all over the country. Nebraska didn't get to number one under Tom Osborne because they were recruiting the state of Nebraska to win. They were going into Florida, they were going into Texas, in California, and then all throughout the Midwest. So those teams that built up, some of them are still not on top, but that Michigan Notre Dame, I still think it has a national appeal, but not when it comes to the winning as much. Auburn and Washington, that's a big game that has an appeal from the South playing the Great Northwest, and you have the SEC versus the Pac-12. That's going to be great theater no matter who wins that game. But I think Washington has more at stake than Auburn because Washington is figured to be the Pac-12 North champion, even though Stanford may have a lot to say about that. But if they go down there and they knock off Auburn, Big C, does that hurt SEC football in the eyes of you guys? Or is it just, well, that's just Auburn? It's not like they came in and beat Georgia or Alabama, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charleston, you're going to see two of the better passing quarterbacks in the nation in that game, in Browning out of Washington and Stidham out of Auburn.
Yeah.
Stidham's a transfer out of Baylor when they had the scandals going on there under Art Browse, where he was a true freshman at that time. But if you look at Stidham's work, Charlton, his body of work after the halfway point of last season, he really had a grasp of the Auburn offense, and they started to move it. Like I said, at one point, they were the number one team in the country and leading the SEC.
Yes.
So this is the team that's going to return a lot of players from last year, and so they have possibly an advantage defensively. You got to realize that Browning lost a lot of his offensive weapons out there in Washington last year. So they have to bring in some players that have to, make impacts right away in that first game.
Yeah.
They don't have a long leash to figure things out. They got to be ready come game one. So when I look at it, Auburn goes into the game with the advantage. Washington has a chance to win, though.
Yeah, it's always great college football. If you want to see some good football, just Google Oklahoma, Penn State, 1986 Orange Bowl. Really some great athletes. You'll see some of the coaching at its finest. It's great when you have the best going against the best. And speaking of the best, Big C, we'll kick the ball to the NFL. I know this doesn't really matter much to you, but when you hear about big-name NFL players not reporting to training camp, whether it's someone like an Earl Thomas from Seattle, Khalil Mack for Oakland, Julio Jones, Atlanta, Le'Veon Bell, does that matter to you? Or does it matter? Is it more like what Iverson said, it's just practice? You're talking about practice. Most of these players, whether it's, Aaron Donald, Los Angeles, they're all pro players. Now, you do need the team to gel together, but they also got to think about their health more so than showing up for training camp. They're already in shape throughout the year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is a history of players not showing up to training camp. This is nothing new. I mean, this is exciting news for the media outlets to sit there, wow, he's not going to show up.
Yep.
What, is the team going to fall apart because of certain players out there?
No.
No, it's not, unless you're Atlanta. Matt Ryan is like, whoa, they're paying me $155 million and I don't have Julio Jones.
Yeah.
I'm going to look very pedestrian at that point.
Yeah.
That's the scariest situation in the whole NFL, Charlton, of all the players holding out.
Yeah.
Le'Veon Bell has held out the last 3 years. He's walked right in and been an integral part of Pittsburgh's offense, Charlton. Hasn't missed a beat.
Yes.
It's not like these players don't get together with their teammates away from the practice facility, Charlton, and work out. Julio Jones, if he was to walk into Atlanta's camp, the first game of the season, Charlton, he knows the route tree in Atlanta. That offense is not going to change.
Yeah.
It's the same ever since he's been there. So he knows what Matt Ryan's timing is with him. That's no big deal. Khalil Mack, you think you forget how to rush the quarterback?
Probably not.
No. I don't think so. Earl Thomas is the only one left from the Legion of Boom in Seattle.
Yes.
But he plays safety, Charlton. He's been the quarterback on the defense ever since he was at the University of Texas. He's not going to miss a step. He's not going to be out of sync in any kind of way when he eventually does show up there.
Yeah.
Taylor Lewan, offensive tackle in Tennessee, they need him. He protects Mariota's backside. He's a left offensive tackle. You pay those guys, Charlton. There's not that many of them that are that good in the NFL.
Yeah.
When we look up and down the ledger at these players, Charlton, You know, everybody comes into training camp. If you're an all-pro player, Charlton, and you've been a starter in the NFL, training camp really is meaningless. You know, players find a reason to get days off when they go to training camp.
Yeah.
But to have them there for posterity and emotional support of other players, Charlton, you know, I go back to what Ben Roethlisberger said when they drafted Ben Rudolph, and everybody in the media was making a big deal why Ben does not look forward to mentoring the player.
Yeah.
You know, Ben Roethlisberger, they've drafted quarterback after quarterback since he's been there. They drafted Landry Jones out of Oklahoma 3 or 4 years ago.
Yep.
They drafted the kid out of Tennessee, Joshua Dobbs, who was ironically the most intelligent quarterback ever drafted in the NFL.
Aerospace engineer, yeah.
You know, aerospace engineer out of the University of Tennessee. So, you know, when they sit there and say, is Ben going to mentor somebody, Rudolph has to get in line behind those two guys and learn from them.
Yeah.
So, players that are veterans, Charlton, holding out of training camp, I understand the money method behind that, Charlton, wanting more money because the careers are getting shorter and shorter. We've seen so many NFL high-profile players retire in the last 2 or 3 seasons after short careers, Charlton, say, hey, I've gotten enough.
Yeah.
That's what these players are looking at, Charlton. No one wants to play in the NFL for 12 to 15 years any longer. It's just not there physically for the mind or the body. If you can get all your money in 7 to 8 years, Charlton, and retire semi-healthy,
yeah,
take it and walk away from the game.
If you look at it from your side of the field, Big C, as a defensive guy, defenses mostly have to react, and they got to know what the offense is doing, obviously. You can't wait until the game, until the ball is snapped and figured out. There's a lot of studying that goes into it. On offense, you got to get your timing down. So when a player misses camp, the defensive side of the ball is not as important as the offensive side of the ball because they're working on timing. Defense is mostly reacting to the ball. Was that something you would agree with, or is it just as important on both sides of the ball, Big C?
It's just as important on both sides of the ball, Charlton. You got to understand now with the money that is paid to players, they just don't go to mini camp. They work out all year long. I mean, quarterbacks will get their receivers and running backs together and have 7-on-7 all across the country, Charlton. They'll go to Hawaii, they'll go to California, they'll go to Arizona.
Yeah.
They just fly them wherever they feel like they want to fly. Put them up for a week, Charlton. Lake Tahoe, you know, some scenic resort they'll take them to.
Yeah.
They'll spend time in Mexico, Charlton. But they'll go work on their route trees. You got to understand, the route is always the route.
Yeah.
The timing is that you have to run your certain amount of steps, get into your break. That's when the ball is going to be released. It doesn't change, Charlton. If you've been with a quarterback for 3 years, you know what the route tree is.
Yeah, you know what
As a running back, you know where the handoff point is.
Yeah.
It's no mystery to that. You don't sit there as a running back worrying about whether that offensive lineman got the block.
Yeah.
You know which is the A gap, B gap, C gap, and getting on the pitch.
Yeah.
You know what those are. There's no guesswork there. On defense, it's more integral on defense, Charlton, because you have to react to everything that the offense is doing. People think that defense is just running and hitting. No, Charlton. It's making adjustments all the time.
Yeah.
And when you sit there, just like with Earl Thomas, he's just as valuable as any quarterback in the NFL, Charlton, because he's a quarterback on defense. He's making the adjustments to the linebackers. Linebackers making the adjustments to the defensive linemen, Charlton.
Yeah.
He's reading what the offense is doing. And so when you think about football as being a reactionary sport, it is not. It hasn't been. And since I retired years ago, it wasn't a reactionary sport then, Charlton. And now that everything is on a tablet, as you expressively speak about,
yeah,
you have all game film, Charlton, all the time. When you get on a plane now after a game, Charlton, flying back home,
yep,
the game film has been downloaded to your tablet. So when you sit on that plane, you're watching the game. It's not like it was when I was playing, when you had to wait to get back home and they downloaded the VHS. And originally it was the high 8 film.
Yeah.
You know, that they ran on the little machine, you know, tacking back and forth. Take the break, you have to splice it back together.
Yeah.
Then we got to the VHS where, you know, you got there the next day, they had broken down the film, you had offense, defense, special teams, whatever segment of the game that you wanted, Charlton.
Yeah.
But now all of that is on your tablet, and you can find any segment of the game that you want on your pad when you get on the game, on the plane.
On the plane, that's true. Last thing, Big C, I'm sad to hear that Triple Crown winner Justified officially retired today. I don't know if he's looking forward to retirement, but retirement for Justified might be different than retirement for athletes. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Justified, sustained an ankle injury. Allegedly. That's his reason.
Richard Sherman came back.
Yeah. So, since he has this alleged sprained ankle, he can no longer run to the stud barn.
Yeah.
So he has to take that old horse theory. He was going to run over there at first.
He going to walk.
And walk down.
That's funny, Big C, but we wish him all the best, no matter whether it's sports or politics, whether it's football, basketball, baseball. We bring it all to you on Big C Sports. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Bundini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. He would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, now I'm talking that we have 25 teams in training camp. It's going to be interesting to see what's the first big-name player that has an injury and is going to be forced to miss some games early in the season.
Yeah, we hope they can stay safe and stay healthy, especially with all this heat. You don't get the same retirement plan that Justify has. And speaking of Justify, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America, and Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never any excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no one should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.